Today we're going to talk about IRS Form W-8BEN, Certificate of Foreign Status of Beneficial Owner for United States Withholding and Reporting for Individuals. The primary purpose of Form W-8BEN is to establish that an individual is a foreign person, that is, not a U.S. person. It is a relatively short form, only 1 page long. Although the primary purpose of the form is to certify the foreign status of the individual, the form can also be used to claim treaty benefits in Part 2. W-8BEN should only be used for individuals and not for entities. Entities must fill out W-8BEN-E, as shown here and as shown here. The term beneficial owner essentially means the owner of the income being received, and that person is not a nominee or an intermediary. The terminology can get a little confusing because the person making the payment usually has a deductible expense and does not have income. However, it is income to the foreign recipient or the foreign beneficial owner. The U.S. imposes a 30% withholding tax on certain types of payments of U.S.-sourced income to foreign persons. The payor of the income is obligated to withhold U.S. tax unless an exception applies. The payor is referred to as a withholding agent because the payor may need to withhold U.S. tax. The typical types of income that are subject to the withholding tax include dividends, interest, rents, royalties, and compensation for services. However, it is important to remember that it is only U.S. source income that is subject to the 30% withholding tax. In particular, with regard to services, if the payment is being made for services that take place entirely outside the U.S., then the income is not considered U.S. source income, and the 30% withholding tax simply does not apply. However, it gets much more complicated if any of the services are performed in the U.S. These withholding rules can get a little tricky, however, because you may be making a payment to an individual outside the U.S. that happens to be a U.S. citizen. For payments to U.S. citizens, you are typically required to send them a 1099 reporting the payment to the IRS. In that case, you ask the recipient for a Form W-9 and not a Form W-8. And on the Form W-9, they certify that they are a U.S. person and they provide their U.S. taxpayer identification number so that you can file the Form 1099. Payments to U.S. persons can be subject to a 28% backup withholding if they don't provide their U.S. taxpayer identification numbers. So it is important to understand that payments to U.S. persons and payments to non-U.S. persons can both be subject to potential withholding tax. So how do you determine if an individual is a foreign person? Well, you ask them to fill out a Form W-8BEN, where they sign certifying at the bottom, they certify that they are not a U.S. person. If a person files Form W-8BEN certifying that they're not a U.S. person and the circumstances change, then the beneficial owner needs to notify the withholding agent within 30 days of the change in circumstances. For example, if the beneficial owner moves to the United States and becomes a U.S. resident, the beneficial owner should then provide a W-9 to the withholding agent. In addition, if the W-8BEN was used to claim treaty benefits and the beneficial owner moves to a different country, that would be a change in circumstances that requires a new Form W-8BEN to be completed. Generally, a Form W-8BEN is good for 3 years and then it must be refreshed. It used to be that in order to claim treaty benefits, the foreign beneficial owner had to get a U.S. taxpayer identification number. However, that has now been changed, and the beneficial owner only needs to provide their foreign taxpayer identification number in order to claim treaty benefits. Treaty benefits are usually claimed to reduce or eliminate the U.S. withholding tax on dividends, interest, rents, or royalties, but there are other circumstances that can be used to claim treaty benefits as well. The Form W-8BEN is provided by the beneficial owner to the withholding agent, and the withholding agent does not file it with the IRS. Instead, the withholding agent keeps the W-8BEN on file in case the IRS ever audits them and asks for the form. One last thing that sometimes confuses people is the certification that the income is not effectively connected with the trade or business in the United States. This type of income is often referred to as ECI, for effectively connected income. Just because the payor, or the withholding agent, may be doing business in the U.S. does not mean that the recipient, that is the beneficial owner, is doing business in the U.S. Some types of payments of foreign-sourced income can be effectively connected income. However, payments for services that take place outside the U.S. are foreign-source income, and those types of payments cannot be effectively connected income. It is important to note that personal services income is sourced where the services are performed, without regard to the location of the payor, the residence of the taxpayer, the place of contracting, or the place of payment. So that is a summary of IRS Form W-8BEN. I hope you enjoyed the video.